Hello, I'm Edward de Chazal from Jurassic Academic, and this presentation is on critical thinking. Critical thinking in 5 words. We hear a lot about critical thinking, but actually, what is it? Where does it come from? Is it new? Who owns it? Well, I think the answer is it's very old and it's global. And to examine this, we can go back a long way. Let's go back 2,500 years to China. The great thinker of his day was Confucius, and he expected a lot of his pupils. He lived 2,500 years ago, and he said, "I will show my pupils one corner of a subject, and from that I expect them to work out the other 3. In other words, he expected a lot of his students. He expected them to think cognitively, to make connections, to make inferences. In other words, they were critical thinkers. Interestingly, at the same time, but in a completely different location, in ancient Greece, we have 3 people who are connected as teacher-pupil. First, Socrates, his pupil Plato, and his pupil Aristotle. And Aristotle said of his teacher, "Plato is dear to me, but dearer still is the truth." He loved his teacher, but he was critical of him. He wanted the truth, which lies beyond, it's greater than any individual, however good they are as a teacher. More recently, in the United States of America, in 1956, a team of researchers in education led by Bloom published a taxonomy in the cognitive domain, known as Bloom's taxonomy. Now they came up with 6 steps, and they go up in complexity, in cognitive complexity. We start with, what do we know? That's knowledge. Can I understand it? That's comprehension. What can I do with it? That's application. How can I take this knowledge apart and work out how all the little pieces fit together? That's analysis. How can I use knowledge from different sources and put them together into something new? That's synthesis. You could call that creativity as well. And finally, evaluation at the top of the hierarchy. Evaluation is where we answer the question, so what? Is it significant? Is it influential? What can we do with it? So increasingly in this taxonomy, the activities cognitively become more challenging, more critical, if you like. So we have a text, we have a person. This leads potentially to critical thinking. This brings me to my 5 letters, my 5 words. They begin A, E, I, O, U, the 5 vowels in English. They are analyze, evaluate, interpret, observe, understand. Let's look at each of these in turn, starting with A for analyze. So let's go through them. Analyze, evaluate, interpret, observe, understand. To put these into practice, let's look at an example. This slide here, I'll read out the text, says China will soon become the #1 English-speaking country in the world. And it has an image of some chopsticks and some rice. Now, this was in a lecture at a university where I taught, and I asked my students, react to that critically. And they came up with some brilliant questions like, when? How soon is soon? Why not India? Why China? How do you know? What are your sources? Where's your evidence for this statement, for this claim? Next question, how well will they speak English? What level? Will it be Chinese English, like we have American English, Indian English? Another question, is it desirable that this should happen? Who and why should they, who thinks they should be speaking English and why? Many other questions like this. So they came up with at least 30 critical questions in response to this simple slide in a lecture. Now, let's look at each of these 5 activities in turn. Analyze, evaluate, interpret, observe, and understand. A for analysis, verb analyze, adjective analytical. What does it mean? 5 things. Focus, really focus on the material. deconstruct it and reconstruct it, take it apart, put it back together. apply criteria such as perspectives. We can explore perspectives and make connections between the parts. How do they connect? Is it a cause and an effect, a situation and a problem, an association between two events? What's the connection? That's analysis. Evaluation, the verb evaluate, evaluative is the adjective. First, consider the evidence, weigh it up. Is it sound? Is it believable? Is it useful, reliable, relevant? Assess the material. Compare it with other material. Evaluation is inherently comparative. We don't look at a shirt or a car or an idea in abstract isolation. We look at it in relation to other shirts, cars and ideas, and we compare it. We then formulate our opinion, our stance, how do we stand in relation to that? And finally, we can do something with it. We can evaluate and then do something, perhaps include that in a text of our own. I, for interpret, noun interpretation, adjective interpretative. We work out and explain the meanings. The best way to understand something is to explain it to someone else, to teach it to someone else. That's what children do. That's how they learn. Speculate. What if? What about? What does it mean? We can generalise. Does it apply to other contexts? We can relate it to other contexts, and we can respond to it. O, observe, noun observation, adjective observable. Notice, really notice what's included, what's excluded. Reflect, personalise, take it personally. What does it mean to you and your knowledge? We can then draw conclusions and inferences. You understand, understanding, understandable. The best way is to experience something. That's when we really understand something. Engage with it, internalise it. Connect it to what we already know, our existing knowledge, our schemata, and finally learn from it. So A, analyse, E, evaluate, I, interpret, O, observe, U, understand. These are my 5 main activities in critical thinking. I'm Edward de Chazal from Jurassic Academic. This was Critical Thinking in 5 words. Thank you very much for watching.